Hello and welcome to the hardest game. My name is Ben Doughty, and I'm delighted to be joined this evening by former amateur boxing champion and founder of the wonderful Sweet Science Foundation, Leroy Nicholas. How's it going?
Very good. How you doing, Ben? You good?
I'm good. I was saying backstage, I'm slightly perturbed. Now I'm getting the interference back where the delay seems to be. It's like I'm whispering in your house as well. And we've already spoke about the lighting. You look like one of those. It looks like I almost feel like you're like the computer, like in Red Dwarf. Where I ask you if I've got a problem. What was the guy Holly? The computer was called. Had two different
Yeah.
incarnations. You look. It looks like that's what I'd expect to see if I was asking you how to get to like I don't know
Nebula something.
yeah, something like that. But other than that, it's all good. Can you guys, if you tune into the show this evening, let me know whether you can hear the any kind of echo or feedback. Although it seems to have settled itself down at this point, so I guess we will suffer it, Leroy, and press on with the main business of the day.
Show must go on.
You know what? In throughout our friendship on Facebook, chiefly, which has been for the last, I can't remember how long it's been. It feels like I've known you all my life already, but I think it's about 18 months in actual fact. We've often gone back and forth. I know you're a man who feels very strongly about the responsibility of a famous boxer to be a role model and to provide an ethical and inspirational example to impressionable youth, whether they're aspiring future boxers or just young fans of boxing. And I know you've been very vocal, almost relentlessly vocal, about some of the famous fighters that you feel represent our sport in a consistently negative light. I mean, Tyson Fury has certainly been a high-profile example thereof. But more recently, today, we were talking once again about Gervonta Davis. Is that correct?
Yeah, 100%. I saw something on another post that I thought would be of interest, and it was. I posted it up on your page. I just want to straighten that out, Ben. I'm not. I think we spoke about it before. You get football players and they're being interviewed, and they all say the same thing. You know, it was a good game. It was a game of two halves. It was this, that, and the other. And it's sort of like you know what they're going to say before they say it. Tennis players, pretty similar. And I understand how that is sort of like a little bit vanilla and it can get a little bit boring. I don't expect, and that would, even if I did expect or want that for boxing, it's never going to happen because the sort of characters that boxing throws up are so diverse that you're never going to get.
And people even say, like Michael Marley called it the sewer of professional sports. Now, as bad as that sounds, I think there's part of us that finds that poetic and artistic, and we're a little bit proud of the fact that boxing is this famous historical den of iniquity. Yes.
Yeah. So what I find really edifying about that is when you get somebody who's come from the sewer, as this guy says. I've never heard that before, but it does make me laugh, and he's possibly not far wrong. Who can actually drag it out of the sewer? Somebody who has these traits that have been sort of, ingrained in them from maybe a young age, or their whole, from the lifestyle that they've lived, but are able to sort of drag themselves out there and drag things with them. I sort of like that, not people who sort of like keep it there. I have no issue with the bad guy in boxing. I think it's more than I know it's essential to the excitement of it. You need a giant haystacks to a big daddy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You need those guys. I get that completely. That's what makes it. But I just don't want it to get out of hand. I mean, the gentleman said on something I posted up today, I think we're too far gone now. It's never going to change, and people always, that's what people want now. That saddens me that people think that way, and I will, till my last breath, fight against that. It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way.
Okay, so I'd like to get into a wider discussion about role models and fighters, usually famous, era-defining fighters who came from somewhat of a ghetto background in some cases. But before we do, let's deal with the specific thing that made me really want to have this conversation with you in a head-to-head sense. The thing with Gervonta Davis that you've constantly, I think you're almost, his qualities of a fighter are of such small moment to you, I'm not going to say you're blind to them, but you're almost willfully oblivious to them because you take exception to his behaviour and his public face, his persona so much. Now,
Mm,
with Davis, you said that you tell all the youngsters that you come into contact with, if they mention Tank and they express some kind of admiration for him, you say you make no bones about saying that he's not your cup of tea and he puts his hands on women, and obviously that's, you get the old axiom that no man raises his hands to a woman, no real man. Now, my issue with that, as I've said to you before, and I know you've got a ready-made response for it, but let's expose it now for the viewers, is that some of our most treasured icons of the sport had issues of spousal abuse and ugly incidents with women and partners, etc. Notably, and I used them for the thumbnail for this show. You had Sugar Ray Robinson, his wife Edna May would say in a documentary, that Bright Lights, Dark Shadows documentary, she said he would slap me all over the place if I displeased him, in a way that, because he was dictatorial and arrogant. And he was like that, not just with his wife, but he was like that with other people like campaigns. He would give them a slap if he thought they needed it. Now, so that was Ray Robinson is one example where that's a rather unedifying backstory. That
mm,
Muhammad Ali, there are incidents like it's been described, and ironically, it was Sugar Ray Robinson who came actually to the Ladies' Aid. He was having a row with his first wife, Sonji Roy, who he married pretty hurriedly, somewhat, when he became heavyweight champion of the world, sensationally beating Sonny Liston. And he didn't, it was never going to work, and it didn't have longevity because she was a singer, a nightclub singer. She liked flashy dressing, she liked to dress sexy, she liked makeup, and obviously, him embracing the Muslim religion, that meant that was all what they call it, munkar and haram. So that wasn't going to work. And one time he was dragging her into a room at a party because he wanted to talk to her, a bit like Javonta Davis dragged a woman. Was it a basketball game? He dragged her
yeah,
off, and you
yeah.
said that was very unedifying and despicable. And it was actually Sugar Ray Robinson who was banging on the door, said, "Hey man, is everything okay in there?" And supposedly Ali said, "Listen, Ray, back off. You're my idol, but you ain't nothing but a middleweight, and I'll whoop you. You mind your own business." So, and it
Mm,
is ironic that what Robinson didn't like there, because no one likes the idea when it's someone else's wife or girlfriend and
yeah,
they're not emotionally involved. But
yeah.
sometimes funny things happen when people's feelings are involved. I'm not saying it's not defensible. So you had
Mm,
Ali and Robinson. There's two examples of people who were not above dragging a woman off and taking her to a room where you could give her a good talking to. And
mm,
then obviously you had Joe Lewis, talks of strangling Lena Horne, who was a big singer and sex symbol of the era, when he says he was ashamed of it and he doesn't even remember it. He said it was like a blackout. Next minute, he's got his hands around her throat. So I'm saying some of the most treasured icons of the sport had those kind of issues, but you don't like Javonta Davis. And you also say, yes, but that was in less enlightened times, which I'm not sure if that is altogether mitigating, but it's about time I let you talk because I've been on quite a monologue.
no, what you just said there needed to be said. Just again to clarify my point on that is, I don't think that it's okay because it was years ago. It's not because it happened years ago and it was historic that now all of a sudden it's like, that was then, this is now. What I am saying is that, well, two things. One, I wasn't aware of what had happened then. The press didn't go into things like that way back then.
No, because they mind their own business and they had no social media. Joe Lewis, you know what? Joe Lewis could shag around and he was slept with starlets like Mae West and all the rest of it. Joe Lewis was a boy, and who can blame him? He was the man. So he was almost the epitome of masculinity, and the strongest man in the world. So
Yeah,
the press left him alone. If he was banging Mae West, they did not consider it their business in that era. They honestly didn't. The same, the way you might not consider something your business or my business today,
yeah.
normal protocol. That was the media protocol then. It was not their business. Whereas obviously, that's completely like a different stratosphere today, isn't it?
Well, I'll bring something a little bit more up to date. There used to be a gentleman who I used to do personal training with, and he was the legal representative of a very, very famous English cricket player, household name.
Yeah.
And he told me that they'd sit down and have beers with the journalists and do all sorts of things with the journalists, but the journalists knew that there was a line that didn't need to be reported as far as they were concerned. They didn't have that sort of like, I don't even know what the word is, it's not coming to me now, but they didn't want to grab a sensationalist. It wasn't anything like that. It was sort of like, we're here to report on cricket, And if you have a baby with your missus, we'll report on that. And you know, if you open like a business, we'll report on that. That was all they were there for. But
Yeah.
times have changed, obviously, and this is one of my major points about what we're talking about now.
Okay.
I didn't know anything about Muhammad Ali doing that, Sugar Ray Robinson doing that, Joe Lewis doing that, Sugar Ray Leonard doing it. And
Well,
even if I
okay,
had,
but Sugar Ray Leonard, I mean, that when you talk about eras as well, that was the 80s. It was already definitely unacceptable. Women were wearing power shoulders and making moves, and there was a lot
yeah,
of equality kind of politics took flight in the 80s. True. So
yeah,
you can't quite put Leonard in that era, or or you can't quite use the defense, as it were, of less enlightened times and a different cultural normalcies. Also, Floyd Mayweather, let's be honest, I mean, Tank has not served a prison sentence yet, to the best of my knowledge, for spousal abuse, whereas Floyd did, right? Floyd, do you remember when Floyd went to jail after
yeah.
what fight did he go to jail after? Was it
I can't remember the actual fight, but I remember seeing him in court, and he got off. They let him off once as well because he was going to bring so much money into because of the
they
fight.
didn't
If the fight got postponed,
They didn't let him off, Leroy. What they did was they said he could. They said he was able to start his sentence whenever was convenient for him. They basically said, "Okay, Your Honour, no problem. It's a fair cop, but he's
okay,
got this big fight in." It's going
yeah,
to annoy me. Can you, one of you guys, one of my unofficial researchers in the comments, who've already made some very interesting comments, by the way, if one of you could remind us which fight it was that Floyd went to prison after. Cotto, I think it could have been Cotto. It may have been Miguel Cotto, but regardless, they said, Your Honour, he's fighting May the 5th or whatever it was. It was definitely May because Floyd would fight in May and September, wouldn't he? Like Canelo does today.
yeah,
And they said, would it be possible for him to? It's not convenient for him to start his sentence right now because that's going to interfere with our schedule. Could
yeah,
he have the fight first and go to prison afterwards? And the judge said,
yeah.
of course. I can't see a problem with that.
And the amount of
So
money that he would have brought into Vegas, they were sort of like, okay, let it slide.
So Floyd went to prison, and I remember it was bizarre, Leroy, because he was interviewed in the ring afterwards after another impressive points victory, and they said, okay, so obviously now you're going to prison, kind of thing, and he said, yeah, it is what it is, but I'm still blessed, and I'll be back soon enough, and it was really strange, but
Yeah,
but Floyd he cannot possibly use that excuse, and again it comes down to poor impulse control, ego,
yeah,
and the idea of, you know what as much as we claim boxing is fantastic for character development and focus, discipline, and control, and it is, we're not prepared to discuss as a collective boxing culture the fact that a lot of fighters, when they remove that framework, when they're in retirement or inactivity or just nightlife and drink and drugs, some of that control goes out the window, doesn't it?
yeah. Well, I've never. It seems to with a lot of them, with the high-profile ones. Unfortunately, I've never been blessed enough to be at that level where I could give you my view on it. But to go back to what we sort of initially said, Leonard, I sort of will include him in that group a little bit because the 80s were a long time ago. As much as things were changing, the 80s were, as much as they seem like yesterday to me, they were a long time ago now, and a hell of a lot has changed since then. So
But
I
think it comes down to the fact you like Sugar Ray Leonard, whereas you really don't like Gervonta Davis, and that's why that is what I'm getting at here.
yeah,
I'm not saying, to be honest, I said to you at one point, Tank was my favourite active fighter.
mm,
He isn't now, because I'm getting fed up of it. He doesn't fight. How can he
mm,
be my favourite active fighter when he's not active? So I'm going off him because he's
yeah,
not getting in the ring. But
but
as far as
not because of his personality. But this is the thing,
no,
Ben. This is a little bit of thing I struggle to deal with, and I was using a little bit of introspection earlier on today and going into why perhaps that might be, and I just cannot see past that. I wouldn't care if he was the best thing since sliced bread. If it was, let's say, a fighter I've been excited about in the last good few years, Meldrick Taylor, when he was coming through, if I knew that he was doing stuff like that, I wouldn't have bothered with him. I wouldn't have
but you
tuned
can
in.
get past it with Sugar Ray Leonard. So what I
No,
suspect it comes down to is Sugar Ray Leonard was class personified and was so cool and so eloquent and an inspirational guy. And also
no,
he was also
there,
10 times better than Tank, regardless of how
yeah,
good Tank is. But
there's a lot more to it than that, I think, and this is the reasons why. Because I didn't know that he was doing that sort of stuff then. I had no idea of it, and he was put across as the most wholesome thing in the world.
he was.
And he was someone who I really gravitated to. I had no idea that he was doing that sort of thing. That, plus the fact that at that age, Ben, I didn't have the emotional intelligence or life experience to understand
To make
what
that kind of
beating a
judgment.
woman up meant. I really didn't. I've never put my hands on a woman in my life. Even when you're a kid, when you're 6-year-old kids and girls in your fight, sort of like, I would still be like that. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's the way I brought up or whatever. But that's the reason why. They're this very sort of complex reasons why he doesn't get a pass from me, and I'm hugely disappointed. And if I'd have known that, as soon as I knew it, it was like a dagger to the heart. As soon as I started reading, when when
But
it came out years ago.
The thing about Ray is he's honest, and he's in recovery.
Yeah.
Well, there's definitely something where you're saying now, mate. I'm echoing back like crazy.
Not here. Sounds fine here.
Guys, tell me if you could get in that, because it's ridiculous at my end. It suddenly started echoing like somebody turned something up. I mean, I don't know if you want to check that volume on the phone again. I don't know if the buttons are moving.
I haven't touched anything, mate.
It's settled down now. Okay.
Okay.
What was I saying? The thing about Ray is he's in recovery. He's a recovering alcoholic. He identifies as a recovering alcoholic addict, and he's been through a lot of things. And he realised he spoke in his autobiography. He made a distinction between Ray Leonard, the real person with a mixture of humility and character failings and qualities and all the rest of it, and Sugar Ray Leonard, which he saw as something of a monster and a media creation and a creation of his own ego. So when we talk about all we talk about is the imperfection of a life, which is warts and all, where there's been certain things where people have been involved in certain things. I mean, one day he was shooting the TV. He was so in angst and not irritable, restless, and discontent that he shot the TV because he didn't like something that was on it at one point. You know what I mean? So that's the kind of wilderness people go through. I would like to take some of these comments because they're good comments, by the way. Just before we hold that thought. Joe says Oscar Bonavina pickpocketed an old lady of $1 on a train to prove he could still do it when he was a top contender. That's a little bit of a snippet there. He also says, didn't Ron Lyle shoot his wife? Michael Doak's done 10 years for beating his woman. I didn't know he did 10 years, Doak's, for that, I must admit. What else did Joe say? The guy who fought Jimmy Young, Wendell Bailey, his wife wasn't going to put up with it, stabbed him to death. Okay, yeah. And Nick M's Boxing Channel says, Carlos Monzon. I was going to get to that, Nick. Carlos Monzon strangled his wife and threw her out of a window. And here's the thing, right, Leroy? I noticed Monzon is pretty revered still. People still talk about what a great champion he was, what a cool guy he was.
Yeah.
He was always with them cracking blonde models and all that. But funny enough, my mate John Doyle, who watches this show sometimes, he was knocking Russell Brand at one point. I quite like Russell Brand, and he was giving him. We've been in this as well. It was before the allegations, by the way. But he was just saying what a wanker he was. Can I say wanker? Will it affect my monetization? We'll have to see. I mean, you know what? If it does, Leroy, that might be £5.72 that I'm swindling myself out of. So be careful. Listen. He said he was criticising Russell Brand once, and I said, so you'll have a go at Russell Brand for playing a joke on the actor that played Manuel in Fawlty Towers, but you'll revere Carlos Monzon, who strangled a woman and threw her off a balcony. And John, with commendable honesty, said, I don't mind Monzon. I can't stand Russell Brand. But that's what it comes down to most of the time for me.
Yeah. But listen, I've said this to you before, and I did find it frustrating at one point where I get where you're coming from, where you sort of think that I would just override anything because of my like or dislike of a certain fighter.
Yeah, personalities
again
and emotions.
I really try and keep myself in check on that, and I must admit it's not really difficult. I find it quite easy. Again, introspection is one of my favorite things. I want to make sure that I'm not being stupid about stuff, and the only way you can do that is but examine your own thoughts and your own feelings. It's not because of that. I mean, if I had known about Leonard, let's just say at the time when he was like getting, let's just say after he fought Hearns, for example, and I found out that he was a wife beater, again, I was still probably not as emotional intelligent as I would be now, and I'd still be caught up in it.
He was not a serial abuser,
not at all. Not at all.
Incidents.
Not at all. So, but let's just say, for the sake of argument as such, that happened. And it came out. I would have, and let's just say I did have the emotional intelligence to sort of think, oh, that's a bit rough. I don't like that, or I've gone off you a bit. If he'd have come back out in his next fight and been a bit, showed a bit of humility and sort of been like, what, like, guys, I've done some, blah, blah, blah. But I'm going to make up for it. Me and Juanita, this, that, and the other, we've had to talk about it. And, I was just going through a bad time in my life and blah, blah, blah. I'd have gone, Okay, all right. Let's see. That's all right. Let's see. Davis, on the other hand, is still walking around the place like a muppet, still giving it proper large, not fighting anyone. You know, not that that matters to me. I don't care who he. Like I say, it wouldn't matter to me if he was the best boxer in the world, mate, at all. Um, I've got no time for him because he still just swans around the place like he's done nothing wrong. He paid out a couple of quid. The woman withdrew her charges. Okay, and now he wants to still give it large, and he's having a go at Bud Crawford, which is what I fronted you up today about, saying how his wife is £350 and he's got eight kids, and that's why he's got to work overtime. He needs to keep his mouth a little bit shut and fight somebody and stop beating women up. That's my opinion, and that's why I really just haven't got no time for him. I don't. What am I wasting my time with this guy? I know you think he's the business. I can tell he punches hard. I still don't see anything about him special. And I've heard you say this. I know he wouldn't have got the. Well, look, do you know what? All right, I'm again for the sake of argument, I'll say this now. You say he's more than a puncher. I've seen him do a few things. I'm sort of like, yeah, that's pretty cool, right? I don't study him because I can't really look at him, but let's see if he's more than a puncher when he goes up against someone. I'm so gutted he didn't fight Lomachenko because I would bet my house Lomachenko would have turned him on his head, mate. Yeah, if he hit Lomachenko with 2-3 punches on the spin, he'd probably put him out. But Lomachenko, for me, he would have turned him on his head because he's just smart. He's smart. He's too smart for him. That's Usyk versus Fury, that is, or Joshua. But that's my opinion, and perhaps we'll never know. But just to be clear, sorry, go on.
That will be an elite matchup, and that's what you're dealing with. And obviously, Lomachenko is one hell of a fighter. Perhaps he's somewhat past noon at this point, and he's been out with an injury for a while, and we're not sure what he's doing. But that will be an elite matchup. But definitely, Gervonta Davis is a scientist. He's so smart, and I think it's a paradox, Leroy, because Jose Torres once said it's impossible to be a smart fighter and a stupid guy. But I do think you get guys like Gervonta who are not the smartest cookie in a jar, but what happens is, that all their intelligence has gone into that boxing intellect, and they don't have much left for the rest of life.
Yeah, it seems to be that way. Yeah, it seems to be that way. But that's my thing on it, and I don't want to come across, man. Now, listen, I've done stupid things in my life. I've never put my hands on a woman in my life, but I've done stupid things, mate. But in some occasions, I've had to learn. It's taken me a couple of goes to learn, to figure it out. But this is not, for me, the way that boxing. Like I said, there's a good guy and there's a bad guy. There's no problem with that. But this is not someone to be revered. I mean, you had that guy who played volleyball in the Olympics or something like that, and he flew across. I can't remember where he came from. He flew across and he slept or messed around with some girl who was underage, and there was an uproar about it. But he still played the Olympics. I was like, what? What are you doing? This sort of stuff doesn't fly in football over here. It doesn't fly in tennis. It won't fly in rugby. No one's swallowing it. If we start accepting this sort of stuff, boxing, then we are truly what Mike Marley said, the sewer of sports. I don't want to be that, man. I want to promote this sport as it used to be called, I believe, like, the sport of kings. To me, it's the ultimate sport. I've always promoted it as that. You got, 12 guys or 11 guys, whatever it is, don't even know, playing football against each other. Great skills, pass the ball, all the rest of it. Fantastic. Same with rugby, whatever. This is two geezers and two women going up against each other. It's pure. It's pure. There's no real excuses. It's pure. So it's the ultimate sport as far as I'm concerned. It's the ultimate sport. It's the pinnacle. So if you rinsed it all down and came down to it, it would come down to two guys or two women having a little stand up. So it's the ultimate sport. I don't want it to be this way. I'm never gonna, like I say, as long as I draw breath, mate, I'm never gonna just let it be. Well, it's interesting. Everyone's happy to let it be. No way.
It's interesting that you say that, because you were talking tonight about the Errol Christie Mark Taylor situation when they had the fight to Street Fight at one of their kind of early press conferences, which I think was at it was at some hotel anyway. It was at some plush hotel down. I think Kensington way, but regardless of where it was, they had that tear up they had, which was a big news at the time. It was on the 6 o'clock news. It was on the 9 o'clock news. Errol was on breakfast television the next day with Ann Diamond or similar, explaining why he'd been involved in this ugly scene, and the border control reprimanded them both, fined Kayla 15 grand and Errol 5 grand out of their purses. They were only boxing for a share of 82 grand in total. That was the big pot at the time, which was at the time it was the most lucrative fight ever for a final eliminator for a British title. And it was a big deal, and questions perhaps asked in Parliament, all the rest of it. Whereas today, it is absolutely the default model to have people throwing tables, pushing one another, throwing an unsanctioned punch.
Right. Can I ask you a
Quote.
question now, Ben, on that then? As you just said there, if the British Boxing Board of Control were to turn around and say, or worldwide were to turn around and say, gents, for every swear word you say, we're going to take 5 grand off you. If you have a row, it's 10 grand. Okay, if you tip a table over, it's 10 grand. If you push your opponent at any point, it's 15 grand. If you punch someone, it's 20 grand. Okay, you see how quickly they would shut the F up, mate. They would all calm down a little bit. And as I posted up something today on my Facebook page, there were some real beefs that happened. Kayla Christie was one of them, and they would have given that money up, no problem. That wouldn't have been their mind. They would have given that 10, 15 grand up because they were at it. Barrera Morales at that press conference when Barrera swung for him, same thing. Hey, Chisora, same thing. Ben and Eubank, they never went at it. They never rolled around on the floor, but they couldn't bear each other, but they were still managed to restrain. And I don't recall any one of them either swearing even. No one turned the table over.
Well, that's the thing. I think ultimately the real, and same with Hagler and Hearns, the real needle when you can cut the atmosphere with a knife and you can almost feel it borders on hatred nearly when they signed that contract, Ben and Eubank, in this studio midweek sports special, and the presenter said, "I've got to say, gentlemen, there's a genuine aura of hate here in this," and Eubank said, "I don't hate the man. He's in my way." And Ben goes, "I personally do hate him."
That's right. That's right.
I've always felt that was much more arresting and chilling to the bone than anything which is actually acted out, that suddenly loses its power almost. And I think Marvin and Tommy had that too. Could you imagine Hagler and Hearns having some handbag scrap at a press conference? I think that would ruin it, like Mike Tyson and Lennox Lewis did, which was awful. But was that the point at which we lost the plot in the new millennium? That was when I remember things like that started to happen, and they started to become part of the course. We could have massive grudge fights in the 80s and the 90s where they still wouldn't put their hands on one another, and then at some point it came to be encouraged. So, with you saying about the board,
what a perfect example. Go back to that in a second, but what a perfect example of realizing that this is the point to not let this happen. With Mike Tyson at the place where he was mentally at that point, getting off of that little podium and bowling across and trying to chin. Well, he didn't try and chin Lennox, actually. A bouncer came up and he went for him instead, as I recall.
Yes.
He didn't go, he went to Lennox, but Lennox shaped up, didn't he? And the bouncer came in and he tried to smack the gig. Yeah. That's the perfect opportunity to go, guys, this guy's off his nut. Do you know what I mean? Let's calm it down. But sorry, you were going to say something about the board and Kayla and Christie, I believe.
I was going to say, your suggestion about the board fining guys for profanities, for physical acts and stuff. The only problem with that, the only real problem with that, as well as the idea that it might imply some kind of nanny state culture, the other issue is with all due respect, who are the board? They're a private limited company. And they're going to be acting with some parliamentary authority suddenly. They have about as much power as they have that is recognised, as we've seen very occasionally when a promoter has wanted to put a fight on, i.e. Hay versus Chisora, which is a great case in point, where the board sanctioned Derek because of his behaviour at the post Klitschko, Vitaly Klitschko fight conduct, because Haygate crashed the press conference and started making a noise, and they got into the spat that they got into. They couldn't sanction Hay because he wasn't licensed by them at the time, but he wasn't going to get licensed for the fight either. Neither would they sign off on him fighting. So Frank Warren, as you know, he promoted that fight at the Old Berlin West Ham ground under Luxembourg sanctioning. So do you see what I mean? The board have authority and power because it's tolerated on both sides. They both sides have got the measure of each other. But whenever we get a situation, which is obviously not very common, but when we've had a situation where a promoter's wanted to go outside the board, they can do it. And they discussed it, didn't they, with Ben and Eubank when it was supposed to take place in October 2022. Eddie Hearn and Callie Sowland were considering at least going with alternative sanctioning in London with that fight. So
Mm.
I don't think the board have enough power and muscle to actually start. All right, they find Christine Kayla, and I think they have more jurisdiction then, because I think it's only in more recent years that a lot of people have said they're only a private limited company, and they don't have any more authority to govern than you or I, in actual fact, really. You know what I mean?
Well, that's a real shame, and I hope that what you just said there is not entirely accurate. I really hope that it's not. I hope that they have got some teeth. That will.
People are
That
always
will be.
saying they haven't, Leroy. People are always saying that they're ultimately. I mean, I've probably should be careful what I'm saying to an extent in terms of diplomacy, because I'm not a license holder currently, but I have been, and I will be again. I will be applying for the manager's license again this year. So I've got to play ball with them to some extent. But I know a lot of
Yeah.
people have suggested that really the people like, obviously like Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren in this era have got just as much power in this game as the board have. They are not subordinated to the board. And don't forget that Frank Warren also bailed the board out when they had a lot of problems, financial burden, because they lost that court case to Michael Watson, right? Because it was found that they were negligible with the on-site care that was available for him, emergency services, paramedics. That's why, they used to have their offices in London, and they were forced to move to Cardiff when they were
Yeah.
smarting under the weight of the judge's award to Michael Watson. Frank
Yeah.
Warren, they say, came to the rescue financially and paid a whole bunch of that money. But obviously, the sense of the owed favour is well established, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And like I say, mate, that'd be a shame if that is the case. If they are bowing down to anybody else. But you know what? Just basic common decency, Ben. I mean, I'll go back to it again. Do you want your look? If Muhammad Ali was in, or Sugar Ray Leonard, right, were in a press conference with Hearns or Foreman or anyone like that, you would bring your 6, 7, 8-year-old kid, 10-year-old kid, and say, "Watch this! You got to watch this guy. He's great. Like, watch him." And you'd have no problem whatsoever doing
Some
it.
people wouldn't have done in the 60s where Muhammad Ali was concerned, or Cassius Clay was concerned. Because don't forget, at the time, he was a highly controversial figure. He was hated and loved, certainly as much as he was loved back then. He slapped Ernie Terrell at a press conference, so he wasn't above that kind of handbag situation. He made a lot of highly controversial and some things just blatantly wrong things he said about race and gender back in the day when he was an angry and relatively naive young convert. He said a whole bunch of stuff. A black woman should die if she goes with a white man, all that kind of thing. He said it. So let's not sugarcoat Ali. That is the biggest issue I've got with. I idolize Ali. Always did. Always have done. Still do. Always will do. But let's at least know who we're idolizing, and let's acknowledge the warts and all, and let's acknowledge the complexity of that colossal individual.
I like to think that I am, because those were the days when they would potentially hang a black guy. They were the days, with your Medgar Evers days and all the rest of it going on. Those were the days when you had Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and you had Malcolm X saying, "Well, you're going to carry guns.
By any means necessary.
We're going to carry guns. If you think that way, then we think that way." And I have no issue with that. And again, it's funny how this brings us back to the time, because that's how we, and when I say we, I'm talking about black people here, I guess, had to stand up and say, well, we're not going to sort of put up with that. If that's going to be the way you want to call it like that, we're going to call it like this. So when Muhammad Ali was standing up and saying that sort of thing, it was because he was just holding up a mirror to what was being told to him. So I'll go back to what I said about him sitting, watching a press conference and bringing your kid in. If you brought your kid in to watch that at the time, black or white, if you brought that kid, you wouldn't bring your white kid in, because you wouldn't want a white kid to see this black guy talking like he ran the show.
I wouldn't bring a mixed race kid either if I were you, because he said he was against mixed race. He was against race mixing. In 1975, he was still saying no white person or black person in their right mind wants kinky-haired, blonde-haired, kinky-haired, blue-eyed Negroes or something like that.
Yeah,
he said.
but you see, me personally, I would. Me personally now, and maybe I'm saying this in hindsight, but it's how I generally feel in the split second that you just put this to me. I would have brought my mixed race kid in there and said, listen to this. This is what sort of you know, what people think. He's saying that because this is what white people are saying. White people are saying, you shouldn't go
Well,
with black people.
no,
So
that's
this,
wrong. That is wrong, mate. That is wrong. White
go
people
on.
were not saying that. And let's have a few clarifications. One, to be fair, he wasn't saying it at press conferences. Of course, he wasn't.
I
So,
didn't think so, to be
but
honest. But go on.
no, he wasn't. But Victor Bockris, who was like a kind of hipster, white, long-haired writer who had done something about Andy Warhol and the Velvet Underground, I believe, was the other connection he had literary-wise. He was a photographer, though. He wrote a book about Muhammad Ali. It was based on the photographs he'd taken, but there were interviews and transcripts. And he was saying that, he said about no white person in their right mind or black person wants mixed race children. That wasn't what white people were saying. That was what Muhammad Ali, still in some ways the black separatist, was saying, who has since been plaster sainted and represented as all warm and fuzzy like the fucking Muppet Show, for a dumbed down,
Don't swear.
largely stupid mass audience. And that is what you're always going to get in life. Whatever is easiest to swallow and what is ever the easiest, filterable, most inspirational representation. That's why you get all these fake Ali quotes. All I'm saying is,
Am I missing something here, though? Are you saying that Muhammad Ali was saying that? Am I missing something here? Are you saying that Muhammad Ali was saying no black people should go with white people?
Yeah.
But are you saying that white people were saying, oh, yeah, we're open to it. We don't really like black people, but we're open to it. Like, white people can go with black people if they choose to. That's what you're saying.
There was still a lot of racism there as well, but by the mid-70s, not every white person was completely against the whole idea of race mixing. Clearly, you had guys like John Conte who was a lightweight champion of the world at that point, But I think Joe sums it up well, because the beauty of Ali and the wonder of Ali was that he was a paradox and a massive contradiction, but he was a huge victory for everything that didn't fit into the computer, and that's why I love him. So many reasons why I love him. That is one of them.
Yeah.
Joe says Ali might have said bluebirds with bluebirds and stuff like that, but he saved a guy from jumping off a building, and that was Ali was mixed race, says Joe. Yeah, to a degree he was. He had white blood, as it were. And do you know what he said? Well, it wasn't what he said.
Bob Marley.
Yeah, as was Bob Marley. But you know what Ali's autobiography says, which I have a copy of it somewhere here. I think I got it right there. That's the greatest of my own story, right?
I've got that. Yeah, I own that.
Yeah. Okay, so that was ghosted by Richard Durham in 1976. And in this book, he talks about when people say that his grandfather was white, and he had Irish heritage. He says that is what white people do, or what white America tends to do. I'm paraphrasing from memory. He says, rather than recognize black genius, achievement, or talent, they will search for some evidence of white blood. It says, well, if white blood is anywhere in my family lines, it came by rape and defilement. That is what he says. That's what it represents him. He didn't write it, we know, because Ali wasn't no writer. I realise that's a double negative, and I should have said wasn't any writer to any. He wasn't. That wasn't amongst his competencies, that kind of literary ability. But listen. But people only take the bits they like, Leroy. People only ever take the bits they like, and they hear what they want to hear, they see what they want to see, and they take the bits they find most palatable. That's all I'm contending with any of this. The human race is intrinsically imperfect.
Yeah.
And Terence Crawford, while we're at it, I think he's a bit of an own goal half the time because he talks so ghetto, just like some country black, gangster type. I mean, if there is such a thing. I suggested one time a little while ago the reason why Crawford is not a crossover star like a Sugar Ray Leonard type thing, despite his wonderful ability and his undefeated record and everything else, is because he just doesn't carry himself in a way that's going to be marketable to a wide enough demographic of people. And some people say to me, "No, that's all wrong, Ben. No, these are different days. It's a different thing. It's a different fashion of vocabulary, and that's not why Crawford's not massive, and that's why he struggles to get arrested in his home state." But I think it is, Leroy. I think because at half the time he's just as bad and just as illiterate as Gervonta Davis in his ramblings and the things he says.
I agree with you on that, because I've never taken to him too much at all. Excuse me. But I've never seen him dragging his missus out of a basketball match into the women's toilets. So I've got a lot more time for him, even though I'm sort of like not that thing. But
is it possible? How much did Gervonta Davis say that Terence Crawford wife weighs?
350 pounds.
So is it possible there's a logistical issue with dragging her to the bathroom at a basketball game, even if you wanted to? So I can't believe I said that. You've got to factor in the practicality of all this as well, Leroy. It's all very well talking about, moral platforms.
All right. All right, you dummy.
Can we strike that
Yeah,
from the record? Because I may want to
that's
interview
what he
Terence
said. He's
Crawford
got to
one day.
work double hard. He probably weren't right. Yeah, do you know what? Maybe Gibraltar was right. They say a stop clock is right twice a day. Maybe that is it. And that's made me cry with laughter. That has done me.
Yeah. But no, seriously, I mean, I think Tank it is a shame people carry on. Teofimo Lopez is another one. I think, he's another one who doesn't seem to fight right now. He was just saying he doesn't want to fight Kershawn Davis because they've only offered him, I think it's Kershawn Davis, because they've only offered him 2.8 million, and he's the last star power that Top Rank has got left. And some of these guys won't get in the ring. And like I say, I think Tank is an elite talent. I put him up there on song up there with any fighter, and any of them top cluster half dozen of fighters in the world. But I'm going off him because he won't fight anybody. And then at some point, he needs, when you carry yourself like he does, you need to fight damn well and damn often, because that's the only thing that. Imagine Floyd Mayweather, if he hadn't have been undefeated and so flawless most of the time, he was there to be shot at. Some of the way he behaves and his kind of. Floyd Mayweather stood for nothing except materialism, literally nothing.
Yeah.
Hard work and dedication and materialism. That's what he stood for. The idea that you could buy your own beach island one day if you shoulder roll.
Do you think Turkey? Why do you think Turkey Al Sheikh has not got his claws into Davis yet? I'm completely unsure why. I don't know why. I'm genuinely asking.
He didn't get invited to the Ring Awards, apparently, did he? Because that's what Crawford said. Somebody's obviously salty about not getting invited to the Ring Awards the other day. Because I got an invite. I must have got Tanks, maybe. There was like one left, and they thought, you know what? We're going to make a statement by giving it to a complete nobody instead of him. But it's a funny story as well. My mate, I don't want to get sidetracked, and I will answer your question. But my mate Spencer Fearon reckons he had an invitation, but he gave it to Shane Mosley. You couldn't make that up, and that doesn't entirely make sense to me. But Mosley appears to sign off on this version of events. So they reckon Oscar De La Hoya tried to block Shane Mosley from attending. So Spencer
shameful.
So supposedly Spencer gave his invitation to Sugar Shane Mosley. I mean, go figure. You couldn't write it.
Wow.
But
why did Oscar get the hump? Because he beat his ass in that first fight.
Supposedly, I mean, he beat him twice, didn't he? But I think Oscar was robbed the second time. I don't know if you remember.
Well, the first fight
that's why
definitely won, but the
first
second one's debatable.
Classic, though, isn't it? The first
I love that
fight's
fight.
Beautiful, isn't it? Isn't it beautiful?
Yeah.
What a fight!
I love that fight, mate. That's up there with Linares and Lomachenko for me in pure, beautiful boxing skills and two guys really going at it.
Yeah,
I love that fight.
That.
Yeah, that's one I watch.
And Mosley beat him as an amateur when they were kids too, so he's actually beat Oscar De La Hoya 3 times officially.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Oh, that's why Oscar tried to block him. Okay, now I get it.
Must be more to it than that. I'll tell you though, De La Hoya, he walked past. I was on the red carpet, trying to get my grab the odd spot interview here and there. I was standing behind Gareth A. Davies and losing out to him almost every time. I was actually too close to him because they'd stopped to do one with him and then they'd walk past and, they want to leave a gap. They don't want to stop for every damn person that's on there, every journalist or whatever.
Yeah,
so
I saw that. I noticed that.
The fact that I was stood right behind Gareth A. Davies meant that I got almost nothing all night. I mean, I got a good bit with Teddy Atlas and a little chat with Tunde Ajayi, and that was it. But I learned from it, and I won't make the mistake of standing behind Gareth A. Davies ever again in any context whatsoever. But what was I going to say? I think with De La Hoya, I was just saying, De La Hoya walked past in a gold lame suit. He had a silicon-breasted, attractive lady. I think they were silicon. Don't sue me. Don't quote me. On his arm, and he looked as pissed off as it is humanly possible to look under those rather fortunate circumstances. He did. He really didn't look happy, Oscar De La Hoya. But
well, that speaks volumes, doesn't it? As was Skip. Was that his wife, by the way? I don't even know why I care. I don't. But was that his wife? Is he still?
I think it probably his wife. I mean, she looked like the archetype of a trophy woman, which I'm not objectifying her by saying that, and she could well be a wonderful person. But if you were trying to cast a televisual situation in which you said, okay, we want the trophy woman here, and he was dressed like the gold lame suit, it was almost like something Michael Jackson would have worn in his heyday. It was quite, but to see how miserable Oscar looks is quite, because you look into his eyes and you can see sadness. I saw that the last time I met him, stroke saw him at a press conference way back in, I think it was Khan Canelo, was that 2015? But Oscar just does not look happy, and he's spoken about not being happy, hasn't he? I mean, Eddie Hearn said that. He said he tries to do all this chirpy kind of controversial thing, but you can see he's dying inside. It's a massive
and I think he was quite right, and that is very sad. And God knows, that guy's been through a lot. I mean, the documentary I watched about him really opened my eyes to the trauma that he's been through. I mean, it's tough. It's difficult to try and feel sorry for someone who's had everything that you would ever want. I would cut a little finger off to have lived his life and won Olympic medals and gone on to box as a world champion and be revered by my people. I'd cut a little finger off of that. So it's difficult to sort of feel sorry for him, but yeah, I still do. But I'm going to hop to something else now. When you say someone who doesn't look happy, I'm going to hop to Luke Partridge here and say that video that he recently put out saying he's retired. If I put a video out and I was saying I've retired and I've got millions in the bank and all the rest of it, I go like, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to make this short and sweet. Do you know what? It's been one hell of a ride. Thank you for being on it with me. But you know what? My time's come now. I'm going to retire. I'm going to spend time with my kids. But instead, no, Partridge had to get up there. Yeah, well, Dick Turpin. He looks like he's got the right arm. Calm down a little bit, mate. Calm down. Relax. You've been done twice.
Can you explain to the viewers who Luke Partridge is? Luke Partridge is your name for who?
Luke Partridge is the true real name of someone who's dragged it out to make it sound really good. I think you call him, he goes by the name of Tyson Fury, something like that. Yeah. You couldn't make a name like that up in your life. But
Leroy's got it into his head that the real name for Tyson Fury is Luke Partridge. I think he is called Luke Tyson Fury, but Leroy reckons the original family name is Partridge. I have no idea, by the way, but Leroy finds a certain pleasure in calling him Luke Partridge because it sounds more like an insurance salesman than a pugilistic gladiator, shall we say?
Yes, Alan Partridge's long lost cousin.
Yeah.
But yeah, until someone proves me wrong, mate, I'm sticking with it. So, but why not just relax, Luke, and just chill, mate? You've had a great career. You've had a result. You took it as far as you could. But what I'll also go back on as well is say that here's my reasoning behind it, right? If he doesn't come back and he doesn't fight Anthony Joshua, it's because he's clearly a guy who can't deal with this. What is it? How does it say? When you build yourself up so high, it's a long fall down, isn't it, right? And he's been mouthing off saying this, that, and the other, and all the rest of it. And now he's been shown up. He's been beaten by the middleweight, gap tooth, ugly, all the rest of it, right? Rabbit, yeah. He's been beaten by that guy who's like, oh, he couldn't touch me. Like, he's been beaten twice by him, right? So now, if he does come back and he fights AJ, and AJ sparks him, cue people coming in on the comments going, oh, he never beat him, and go for it, whatever, right? Fine. Let's just say that he does fight against AJ and AJ sparks him out. He's going to feel and look like such a mug that he won't be able to live with himself. That's where I go. I saw his face the moment that AJ sparked Ngannou out, and he wasn't happy. And that was a long ride home in the car with him and his missus. He wasn't happy. That's a lot of pressure. I understand that. How would anybody feel? The geezer who goes life and death with, and you're at ringside, and the same geezer's in with the geezer you're mugging off, and the geezer goes like bang, and the geezer goes to sleep. Come on. So that's why I feel he might not fight AJ. I don't think there's enough money in the world. I think he'll avoid that because if he gets beat by AJ, it's over.
And if he wants it to be over, then I think he's obviously had a fantastic career. He's earned gazillions of pounds. He was the defining heavyweight of his era till the other guy came along, who was his superior. I think he's proven that. Usyk, I don't think anyone would begrudge him that. But certainly, I mean, it was Frank Warren described him as the joint best heavyweight of this century, didn't he? But I think he's forgot the Klitschko brothers somewhat. All right, Tyson beat Vladimir. But, you know, Vitaly is probably underrated when people talk about legacies. You know that, Leroy? Vitaly, considering he had the 4 years out, I think, between 2004 2008 as well. Vitaly's record is pretty formidable. When you look what he achieved from his abortive challenge to Lennox Lewis in 2003, when that was almost the night that made his reputation and gained him so much respect. Klitschko, I think you'd have to put Vitali up there, maybe before Fury, certainly. And Vladimir, even though he lost to Fury when he was somewhat past noon, obviously his dominance and his legacy and body of work it outranks Fury's, doesn't it? So I don't think
Hugely.
you could, of course. So, I mean, I know some people hated the Klitschko era and they didn't like Vladimir in particular because of the jab and grab thing. But I don't think you could call Tyson Fury the joint best heavyweight of this era, and it's not
No.
fair to call him joint best with Usyk when Usyk has beaten him twice. And there was an element of disagreement about those decisions, both of them, but I don't think they're really upholdable, are they? And I don't think, in terms of history, I don't think they'll be seen that way in several years' time. I think Usyk
No
will be
way.
seen as unambiguously having beaten him twice, and that is that.
Yeah. And all that's left for Usyk to do now is beat. I hope Usyk retires, but if he does fight again, I think if Dubois gets past Parker, which I am really not sure about, in fact, I lean towards Parker. But if Dubois does get past Parker, if Usyk doesn't retire, that's the only fight left for him. And then it's sort of like, mate, I'm finished. I'll beat all of your boys twice.
Yeah.
I'm done here. I'm done, right? I beat AJ twice, Fury twice, Dubois twice. Well, what do you want me to do now? Bacoli, you want me to fight this Bacoli guy? Or do you know what? I'm done. I'm done, mate. I've done it. See you later. Bye. Let that be the end of it. I hope that's what happens.
I think, yeah, me too. I mean, I think that makes an awful lot of sense. Here's a spanner in the works, though, regarding Tyson Fury or Luke Partridge, as you prefer.
Who?
He's you haven't liked him because of his behaviour, his persona, his profanity, his lack of class, the way you feel he's dragged boxing into the gutter, or just to a really lowbrow naff place that you find very hard to respect and admire and look up to. But he appears to be a good husband, a good father. There's never any reports of him putting his hands on his wife in any ugly domestic situations at all. And I suspect, I know we don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but I suspect there really hasn't been any. Unlike Sugar Ray Leonard, who by his own admission was not a good father and was not a good husband, and did put his hands on his wife and have some ugly scenes. So Sugar Ray Leonard ties Luke Partridge. Fury scores actually take away some classless outbursts, an ugly little man, rabbit, dosser, and versus Sugar Ray Leonard's fantastic media carriage and eloquence, not to mention the best fighter, certainly aesthetically the best fighter I've ever seen in my whole life. I don't care whether it's Ray Robinson, Muhammad Ali, or anybody else. Nobody does it for me quite like Ray. I'd rather watch him shadowbox and see most fighters fight. But as a character, obviously, it's flawed. Obviously, Tyson Fury is flawed too. But at least two of your bugbears, you could tack them onto Ray Leonard, but not onto Fury, who your contempt and scathedness for is well documented in our social media loop.
Go back to what I said before, mate, and that's very good. Trying to box me in at the end of the end of the
championship rounds.
But I go back to what I say, mate, and I stand by this. I'm not trying to make excuses at all. I wasn't aware that Leonard was doing that at the time he was doing it.
It doesn't matter what you're aware of. We're talking about inherent. Like I say, when I said today, if one seeks to major in morality, and that is one of your platforms, morality, ethics, representation, then we have to be consistent. And we're talking about the wholesome reality of something here. We're not talking about what you were aware of.
Okay, all right, I can crack on with that. That's a deep one.
So half the time, I think it comes down to who we actually like, because there's times, honestly, Sonny Liston was a flawed character, but I love him. I mean, I obviously never met him, but I love the whole idea of Sonny Liston. Carl Frampton is well respected. I don't really like him at all. I just think there's something there that I don't get along with. I mean, I know some people might remember. I suspect not many people remember. But Frampton did slag me off once on Twitter and jumped on the bandwagon about something which I didn't endear him to me, but to be honest, I'm big enough, I've got broad enough shoulders to take a little bit of grief on social media, so that is not really a problem, and that in itself is not a thing. But when I see people who are put up there as really good guys, media good guys, I don't, with the exception of Sugar Ray Leonard, I don't tend to like those kind of individuals. I think the characters are more interesting, guy even like Tony Ayala Jr., who I know obviously there's a big problem there with someone who's a rapist, and and even before he got convicted for rape, he attacked a woman brutally, savagely, in a drive-in movie theater restroom when he was
Mm.
only 15 at the time. That's and but I found it interesting, the whole story, in a way that someone like even Joe Calzaghe, who's a good guy, a great fighter, not the most interesting character. You know what I mean?
Mm. That's what you've just asked me there, Ben. Is I'm still mulling over a little bit. It's a tough question that you've asked me there. So you're balancing up Ray Leonard and what he did,
Tyson Fury appears to be a good father and a good husband, so
and
far as I can possibly
yeah,
tell.
and Luke. So I get that. It's just two different things in a way
Whereas
because
Leonard
it's
said I
like,
wasn't. He said I wasn't good to my wife. I wasn't a proper father to my
yeah,
kids.
yeah,
But what Ray said was, I am very blessed to get the second chance to be a husband and a father again, because he's had a younger family with his
yeah.
with his second wife. I believe it's his second.
Well, this is what I mentioned a little bit earlier on as well. Is like, if you can listen, everyone makes mistakes, right? It's how you come back from those mistakes. So from what Ray did after that and the way he sort of like thinged it, it sort of makes you realize that knows that he's done wrong and he wouldn't do it again. And I bet you any money that he sort of cracks on with his ex-wife probably okay now. I'd like to think so. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Okay. With Luke, he's been a good, as far as we know. But let's be honest. In that traveling community, mate, anything could go on behind the doors there. You're never going to hear about it anyway. It's cool. She would never come out and say anything, no matter what happened. I'm not saying anything has, and it hasn't, as far as I know. But you'd never hear anything about it anyway, right? So, but then again, I never watched that show. But I have seen a couple of people, ladies, funny enough, who follow you, Ben, on your thing, have turned around and messaged me privately and saying, "Yeah, do you know what? With what you're talking about with Partridge, I'm right with you, because he's horrible. I saw him on that show, and he treated his missus like shit. I've never watched 1 minute of this show.
I saw. I didn't watch one of the series. I think there was a Netflix one. I think I watched the ITV one, which was quite a few years ago now. I think it was 2019, and they came across as almost like a fairy tale romance, really. That childhood sweethearts still in love today. They would bicker and they would get on each other. But she was wearing just as much trousers as he was, and I didn't see any context of bullying at all. And even she would give as good as she got. They would have little tiffs, but there seemed to be a complete equality and an absolute love. But to be honest, it was there's something quite touching about their relationship, because obviously you could have other women in the position he's in, and he does appear to. I mean, once again, I don't know, how the hell do I know? But he appears to be very faithful and devoted and focused on his wife, and doesn't look left or right in that sense. And I've never heard any rumours about Fury and that kind of thing. In all the years that I've been on the boxing scene, and I've met Tyson Fury several times as well, and done the odd interview with him. And you remember when he beat Wilder, when he stopped Wilder in the rematch, February 2020 in Las Vegas, and he said he'd sing, he'd do a song. He busts into a few verses of American Pie, doesn't he? That's one of his party pieces.
Oh,
and when he was singing to her, instead of that, and I know that you're in love with him because I saw you dancing in the gym. He turned around and said, "I know that I'm in love with you," to Paris, which I thought was very touching. The idea they've been together that long, and they still seem to be really in love with one another. And like I say, we don't know. We can't claim to be experts on things, which situations we're not entirely privy to. But my feeling is that Fury is genuine on that, and do you know what I mean? I don't think he does treat his wife badly. I can't see.
No, me neither. There's no evidence of it, and I wouldn't ever say that there isn't, and I hope that there's not. But
so some things do come down to personal feelings. I know you don't like him, and consequently because the thing is, what I feel with myself is I'm not as emotional about a lot of these guys as you tend to be. I mean, you'll keep things busy, like almost like points of view with Barry Took. You'll be, oh, here's Leroy. He's found something else that Fury or Partridge, he now calls him, has done or said, and he's like, look at this, guys, and who's with me? Let's burn Tyson Fury at the stake of public opinion. And I'm like, oh, come on, chill out, for God's sake, Leroy. You know what? What is this relentless stream of having to care this much about
I'll tell you what it is, right? It's not unprovoked. I have seen so many people say so many things that are incorrect and a little bit dodgy, but about AJ and about Luke and all of the stuff that's been going on, and it's sort of, and I've very politely questioned many of them on many occasions, and said, like, what makes you think that though? Oh, well, because of blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, but that doesn't make sense because of blah blah. Yeah, yeah, well, yes, it does. And then it ends up, I'm trying to be completely polite and just learn something, but they end up running into a brick wall and a dead end. And then they either like have a go at me and tell me, you're a Fury hater or piss off or whatever, excuse my language, or they just block me. And I'm sort of like, mate, I'm just trying to find out here, but I just run them into a dead end, mate, because at the end of the day, it comes down to them just liking Partridge, and that's the only reason, and really disliking AJ. And I'm like, well, what is really that bad to dislike about AJ? I've met
AJ
him.
gets way too much
He's a
stick. I
lovely
mean,
fella.
AJ Joshua gets way too much stick, and it's so unwarranted. And obviously, he lost a lot of support amongst the more taxi driver brigade when he made those comments at the Black Lives Matter rally. I think it was 2020, right, in Watford. In that funny kind of spring summer of discontent with George Floyd and BLM marches and all the rest of it. And because he said he read something out someone else had written, and he said, "Don't shop in their shops, don't buy their consumer goods," and people took it. Some people took it as very incendiary and very anti-white and all the rest of it. And as you know, some people said they're never going to support him again. And some people have been true to their word. I think those comments were ill-advised and foolish, but I don't think that Anthony Joshua is a racist individual. And I just think he gets way too much stick when he's obviously paid quite a lot of dues. He's done a lot of services to British boxing. I mean, Barry Jones made the point the other day, guys like him or even Audley Harrison when he won the gold medal, they don't do it for altruistic reasons, they do it for themselves. Let's remember that, and that's fair enough. But AJ doesn't deserve the grief he gets. No way.
No.
Yeah.
No. All right, it was before 2012, it's in 2012 or just before 2012 that I spoke to him at length, spoke with him at length, and he's a lovely fella. And all the people I know who've met him, and Robert John Oliver, who knows him very, very well, and is always posting up pictures of AJ turning up at their house, with like cakes or a trophy or something. Do you know what I mean? So he's not racist. Robert John Oliver is a white guy, and so is his, two elderly people, lovely people, and he's going around there. Would he buy Sean the geezer Murphy, turn up at his place with a brand new BMW? If he's a racist, he's not a racist. What he said was, during that time, and again, it was written by somebody else, and he unfortunately just read it out, which it was a stupid move, really, looking back at it. But what he said was like what people do. Chinese people keep their sort of like thing in the Chinese shops. Yeah, they might go to Sainsbury's every now and then. But they will keep their stuff real. Italian people have a little Italy. They will buy their stuff and keep it all there. Indian people do it. Pakistani people do it. Jewish people do it. But if a black guy turns around and says do it, because it doesn't really exist, that black sort of like ecosystem of like, economics, it's oh my God, that's out of order. Like, what? He's racist. And that I was sort of like, man, you really need to, just calm down. And for anybody out here who's watching this and might be trying to take the wrong thing from what I'm saying at the moment, just be aware that my beautiful late mum was a white Irish lady. My dad's a black man. My wife is white, and my children are mixed race. So I'm as far away from racist as you could be, but at the same time, I'm a black man, and that's that's not going to change in any way, shape, or form very quickly. But I'm fair. I just get it from both. I like to try and stay fair anyway. But yeah, so he's not a racist guy, and he's not an idiot, and he's not fake. He's exactly the same as what he was when I met him before 2012. So when people say they don't like him for reasons that they can't quantify, I question why that might be, and sue me.
So on that note, I'm really not sure what we've established precisely, but it's been a good, interesting conversation and a good show. I think it's been a fun show, and it's always good to talk because I think inevitably we've both probably been right to a degree about lots of things that we may have said, and boxing is the sewer of professional sports, like Michael Marley contended. but it's at its height. It is also the, like as you said, the purest, most beautiful, most noble athletic endeavor there is. It supersedes and transcends mere normal athletic pursuits, because there really is nothing like a big fight. There really is nothing like the rich, varied, and dysfunctional history of boxing. I'd never want to see it homogenized. I'd never want to see them characters entirely removed. But at the same time,
No.
I don't particularly like the lowbrow stuff which has infested our boxing culture in this era of social media. I'm not sure what the solution is, Leroy, but it was fun talking about it for well over an hour at this point.
It's always good talking with you, Ben, mate. Like I say, I learn from you, mate. I feed off of talking to you, and I don't mind getting it wrong, because if I get it wrong, it means I learn, and that way I'm improving, and that's what I want, mate. That's what it's all about. Thank you.
I'm not immune to being wrong myself, as you know. In the old
Who
days
is?
of this StreamYard thing, a few months ago, I could press the end and say, "Bye, guys. Please subscribe. Please share with your friends. Please leave a comment when it goes when it uploads, because it helps the algorithm, and keep helping us expand the hardest game towards world domination." And then I could talk to you backstage in the kind of green room, as it were. For some reason, something's changed now, and as soon as I press this end button, that's it. But I'll send you a WhatsApp message for any kind of debrief, should it be necessary. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the show. Once again, you've been listening to Ben Doughty, yours truly, Leroy Nicholas, former boxing champ. I heard he was real good too, because he beat my mate McGilford, so he can't have been any fool. Also, he does wonderful work with the Sweet Science Foundation, which is now. Do you want to say a few words about that before we close, actually?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, Sweet Science Foundation, we work with kids across London, using boxing as a tool to help keep them away from the PlayStations, the phones, the knives, the drugs. And we have a flaming good track record. We do really well. We get experienced coaches who go in and work with these kids and teach them life lessons. Ben worked with us. He was brilliant. And we're a national charity, and we're looking to, as Ben just said, overtake the world, mate. So back us up, check us out, Sweet Science Foundation.
Get involved, go to the website. Leroy, thank you. I'll talk to you, no doubt, before the night's out, I'm sure, via one medium or another. Be lucky. Keep punching. Cheers.
Thank you, mate.